Consistency is determined by the efficiency of your system, not by the quality of your volunteers. That is what is killing ERG efficiency right now. The reality is, yes, again, you are the conductor as the program manager of your ERG program. But if you don't have an operating system, you are also the stagehands of your ERG program. And that is exhausting. I was brought here today to talk about automation, which I will do for context, but just know we can't just jump into automation without setting the tone because there's a lot to discuss when it comes to the concept of ERGs, and before jumping into like how AI plays a part within ERGs, which is like a big topic right now. Specifically, I think that the good starting place of this conversation is going to be talking about goals in particular, which seems a little bit fluffy, but I promise. I mean, I'm not the fluffy speaker. Again, if you know me well, then you probably already know that. So when we talk about goal setting, the thing that I wanted to say to folks today is I think that actually how we've been approaching goal setting in the ERG space is, for lack of better words, wrong, probably not the best approach to goal setting. And so what I will say is oftentimes when we do these sessions, it's very high level. It's like, what things do we want to accomplish this year? It's almost like putting a vision board of to-dos for the next year. The reality is, though, when you have goals, things that you want to accomplish, the next step is you having to bake out the inputs that you need to do to accomplish your goals. That's a whole nother thought process. So just imagine if you did a whole session around goal setting, but you did not incorporate the concept of how are we going to get closer to those goals. Unfortunately, that's where a lot of people are at in the ERG space. Not to attack your goal setting sessions if you did have them, but again, the main thing is that if we're not understanding what the system of inputs that are needed to guarantee that we get to our outcomes, then essentially that's not necessarily like the best usage of our ERG leaders' time and their volunteers and whatnot. So for me, that's why I'm not a big fan of just setting goals, even when I ERG sessions and trainings and whatnot. My big thing is how can I make for better inputs? Yes, we can kind of talk about what we want to accomplish, but we really got to get better at having better inputs to have better outcomes. And that's really the tone of what we're talking about here today. Really, there's three ways why I see ERGs and ERG programs really can have better inputs. This way we can have better results long-term with our ERG programs. The first one that I'll talk about, and like I said, don't worry, we'll come full circle when it comes to the AI and automation piece. But the first one that I'll talk about is when it comes to literal goal setting, which we kind of just talked about a little bit. There's a number of goals that we probably had for ERG leaders or even for ourselves. Maybe with our teams, we might have had something like, hey, this year we want to globalize the ERG program, or we want to make sure that our ERG rosters are filled and whatnot. But what I've learned just in general is that, again, going back to inputs, that's really what's going to determine if we hit those overall big overarching things that we want to accomplish. So what are some better inputs that we can do as program managers, as people over an ERG program to make sure that ERGs are set up for success? The basic things to note when it comes to better inputs would be the 3 Ps of ERGs. I talk about these all the time. I'm a big fan of them. I believe that ERG programs should run like businesses. That's something I always say. So this is a framework I get from the business world. The 3 Ps of business is people, process, product. 3 Ps of ERGs, I just kind of shifted that a little bit. So it's purpose, process, programming, but more or less the same thing. Purpose, understanding why the program exists, essentially. What's in scope? What's out of scope? All of those things, defining those are things that people hesitate to do. But defining your ERG program's purpose is going to help to set you up for long-term success, especially in today's climate, because right now, a lot of ERG purposes are outdated a bit, and that leads to confusion in what is in scope versus what's out of scope. I actually just had a whole conversation with someone this morning on this topic, but having clarity on your program's purpose is important. Thing 2 is processes. That's around not just the handbook, which we'll discuss in a bit, having a good, clear, comprehensive handbook for your ERG leaders, but really it's around everything in enabling your ERG leaders to do the work. Think about it like this. I always say if I were to go volunteer at a food bank, they wouldn't tell me to just go do. They would tell me what to do, how to do it. Like it would be easy for me to be a volunteer On top of that, the thing I usually don't say as part of that is for the people who are over that food bank, there's also a system in place to make it easy for them to make sure that the volunteers are well supported. All of that is part of processes, and there's so much to unpack there, which we'll discuss shortly. All right, programming. That is around the things that the ERG leaders do. So purpose and process, those two things are more so for the ERG program manager to do better for ERG leaders. Programming is more so the things where the ERG leaders come in. So for their events, for their communications, that's all under programming. And really, as we think about how do we do things that engage our members more, it's about having better programming. Now, here's the catch. Oftentimes, it's assumed that because ERG leaders identify with or just care closely about a community, that they're going to be good when it comes to programming. But the reality is, programming and doing good events and whatnot, that's community facilitation. So that's a skill that needs to be imparted into ERG. So also technically there's some responsibility on the person over the ERG program to make sure that their volunteers know how to be good community facilitators. That said, if we're talking about better goal setting, that means that we need to identify which of these three P's is the problem. And from the program manager side, we need to get really clear about the actions that need to be taken to address each of these. I have a whole bunch of material that I have online on that. So I won't overdo it as I talk about that right now. All that stuff is free and whatnot, but I did just want to have that as a tone setter. Also with ERG leaders though, because at the end of the day, the goal is to make it easy for ERG leaders to do their work. That means that we should do what I like to call more recently is define the MVQ for ERG leaders. And specifically what that would mean is their minimum viable quarter. The reality is for ERG leaders, again, we're goal setting. So we're talking about how we do like these annual planning sessions and whatnot with leads. Oftentimes they actually don't even know what is the minimum that they must do for them to be considered successful. And that's a big issue right now. So they're guessing, and some of them, they overdo it. Some of them, they might do one event per year. And I see this because, again, we haven't been clear in setting the expectation of what an ERG must do. And that's why sometimes for Heritage Months, I know we're coming up into that season where there's back-to-back Heritage Months, you will see some ERG leaders who do 2 events per week. And you're like, well, why are you doing that much? And again, you might see some ERG leaders who might do nothing. And you're like, why did you not do anything at all? We haven't defined to them what is, again, their MVQ, the absolute minimum that they must accomplish for them to be considered successful. That's something that I strongly encourage. If you were to take like one action item from this piece around better goal setting, it's to define what the MVQ is for your ERG leaders. What is the minimum viable quarter, I typically say? What needs to be done in a quarter for them to be considered successful? I used to say month, but I feel like month can be a little bit too aggressive, especially because more and more I'm seeing that ERG program managers are having 1 event per quarter requirement. So that's why I think quarter is, it's not too high level, but it's not too like you have to do 1 event every single month. Okay, cool. So that's the first piece. And again, by us clarifying that, so we're also going to be giving them clear inputs on what they need to do in a given quarter. And better inputs equals better outcomes. Or if we give them clear activities, and they're going to have better results. I know some people are hesitant on this concept about giving our ERG leaders or telling them what to do. I think I talk about this later, but I'll just address it now. In general, one of my big unlocks from last year was realizing that ERGs, I no longer define them as employee-led initiatives. I define them as company-led initiatives because at the end of the day, the company is providing the budget for these ERGs. We're giving them the structure. It is a company-led initiative. And at the end of the day, too, when I did a whole thing last year around legal ramifications around ERGs, I literally have a interview on YouTube right now with a lawyer where he says actually talking about ERGs as employee-led positions them really as what's called an employer-dominated union, which is illegal. So technically your ERGs kind of can't be employee-led. So that's why I say now that ERGs are employee-powered, but company-led initiatives. Well, why am I saying that? That means that because it's a company-led initiative, we can't hesitate to lead the program, which means to set these expectations for ERGs. I know that initially it might be a little bit uncomfortable because some ERG leaders are passionate. They've been doing this work on their own for so long that now the concept of like being told what to do, it can be kind of, it's a hard hill to overcome sometimes. But I promise you, better is on the other side of that, essentially. Okay, cool. I think that we touched on that. And really, if you want your ERGs to have more momentum this year, momentum comes from a series of small wins that are consistent. And that is why it's important to have clarity on what these smaller things that ERG leaders can do consistently. This way, they're able to get those wins. When consistency compounds, that's how you have momentum. Okay. Okay, so the question that is in the Q&A is if it's company led, are ERG leaders being compensated? Which is an interesting question. I won't do my whole ramble on this, but I'll give the abbreviated version. Compensation to me, a form of recognition for work, which I do think is valid. I think ERG leaders should be recognized as volunteers for doing volunteer work. However, I think compensation is the default for ERG leader work just because it's the easy thing to like slap a label on and say, we could compensate our leads like they're good. However, for me, I really like the framework of the love languages, appreciation languages, just in general, especially in the workplace. There's a book on it that talks about it just in general. And then there's one that the same author wrote about in the workplace. For me, that was just a huge unlock because I realized if there's 5 different ways that people like being appreciated, really giving them compensation is just one of those. And so there's some people who you might compensate them and they still don't feel appreciated. And then you're like, well, I did something. I think that there's better things to do. I don't think that that should be your end all be all of ERG leader appreciation. I don't even think that that should be your start all. If I was to say a starting point, I would go acts of service in the thought of actually fixing your ERG program and making it easy for ERG leaders to do their work. I think that that's the biggest unlock that you can do. I think that quality time combo of physical touch, which that's obviously kind of weird in the workplace, but that just means in-person connections. I think that having an ERG leader summit, that's a strong one. So that's where I do that one. Words of affirmation. So making sure that executive sponsors give them shout outs or maybe write them a little mini review that can go on their performance review. I think that those are great things, better things. And then when you top it off with compensation in the form of like a stipend or something, I think that that is a well-rounded experience. And I've just seen it that way where for companies who have had that 5-prong appreciation approach, that ERG leaders just feel so much more appreciated than, again, the easy thing. And I've seen ERG programs, so companies, big companies, post proudly, hey, we compensate our ERG leaders. And it was like $300 for the year. So at the same time, it's like compensation, it's so easy for it to be performative. I think that there's better things to do. And to Megan's point online, it's not even always available to do. ERGs don't have the greatest budget already. So maybe there's some other things that we can do that have more impact.
I also think it could, in my experiences, is leadership support is really helpful needed because if you have an ERG lead, ERGs oftentimes are seen as side hustles
Mhm.
and not the main job. And so if there's not additional compensation for that, and then especially if you're not being measured on your goals and OKRs and such, then your manager is seeing your ERG work as a deterrent or a detractor from what your main team goals, organizational goals that are tying into the business. Because it also depends on, in my opinion as well, are ERG goals being tied into the business outcomes? And in many cases, that's not it. And so there's this like middle part that's missing that folks leading ERG work, because obviously they're tied to the community. They want to feel connected within their community at work. And it may not even be in full alignment with whatever the business strategy or goals are.
Which is why I'll say having data for your ERG leads, that's also a powerful form of appreciation because this way now they can tie the work that they're doing to a real result, a metric result, which a lot of ERG leaders they don't have. They can't say, hey, we increased engagement by 35% this year because we did these strategic things. And also, when you have that type of strategic statement, that's really good on your performance review versus we held 5 events. There's just so many things, such an opportunity to really recognize ERG leaders. I went down a tangent, but I was saying that really just to talk about ultimately, if we're trying to goal set better, that means that we need to have better inputs, which means really when it comes to these 3 Ps in general, that we have to get clear on which of these things we need to do. Also, I had this slide later in the presentation Oh, no, I didn't. Man, sometimes I know myself very well. I thought I had it later, but I did move it. This is just a quick one. I do a survey as people join the ERG Champs community, which now lives on ergs.in. But anyway, of their pain points. And this is kind of the list. I'm sure you see some things that resonate here. I will just say all of these things can be resolved with those three P's. Like it's certain P's for certain ones, but essentially, whatever issues you all have could be solved with identifying which P is the problem and then making specific steps for you on how you, as a program manager, will fix it. That's the easy thing there. Okay, great stuff. Now on to thing number two, because I said that there's three ways that we can do better when it comes to creating better inputs to, in the long term, have better outcomes. The second one is going to be around consistency. Don't worry, my slides will change in a bit, but I do have a little bit of a lot to say on this one. Going back to your MVQ, minimum viable quarter, you can say MVM if you want to, minimum viable month. Essentially, once you have that, so you have your list of what needs to be accomplished in a given quarter or a month, you have to be more specific now for those things, because this is typically where most people stop. Most people say, well, I'll give you an example of an MVQ, 8 communications per month. So you have to post at least 8 times in your Slack channel, whatever channels you all use per month. You have to do at least one live event and you have to do two like asynchronous activities that you can assign your members. You have to have the admin of your ERG running, so don't forget to submit budget and stuff like that. And remember to connect with the person who's over the ERG program and your sponsors. That would be the example of a MVQ, like telling ERG leaders their expectation for the quarter. The reason why a lot of ERG leaders struggle, even if they have that, which they probably don't, but even if they do, is because you stopped there and you didn't tell them specifically how to do each of those things. That is a huge issue right now in the ERG space because we don't have clarity on what does it mean to do comms? What does it mean to do an event successfully? What does it mean to even submit a budget? And how have we made this process super easy for ERG leaders? Well, we probably haven't, but again, that's just the reality of the space that we're in. And this is where I included the part where I was saying, again, if this is a company-led initiative, then we, whoever is over the program, so when I say we, I'm talking about program managers, regardless of what you might call it, but we are responsible for making sure that this program is together, which means that it's up to us to define all of these things, to define every single step and sub-step needed to accomplish a goal. So first you start off with the high level. So for instance, we might say do one event per quarter, but that's where we get more specific on how can we make it so easy that someone who is brand new to the company can come in and understand this is how to do an event here and how we know if it's good. Just to illustrate this point, if I told you all to create the perfect burger and I wanted you to create 100, I wanted you to have like 100 burgers essentially that were perfect, what would be the issues with that? Like what red flags would come to your mind?
Everyone's palate is different.
Yes, perfect is different for different people. Great point.
The order of ingredients may differ.
Yeah, what order?
How you put it together.
What order should I do things? What other things would you be like, I don't know how to do the perfect burger? Some people said, well, if you hate onions, but I love them, then we have different opinions on what makes a good burger.
You don't know what materials.
You have no clue. Yes, the ingredients, that's a big piece. Excellent point, Shannon. Are you a vegetarian? Because is it a chicken burger? Is it a tofu burger? There's a lot of questions.
Soft.
Some people like a crispy bun.
Cheese
I don't.
melted on the meat patty or the bun.
And this is the thing. So we have like this concept of perfection that might be in our mind. So I might assume, oh, you obviously know what I mean. But the reality is that you have to engineer, you have to make it clear on what all the steps would be for perfection to show up. That's why I'm honestly such an admirer, although I don't partake in it, but I am an admirer of McDonald's a lot. Because the concept of having teenagers create the perfect burger consistently over and over again, that there's an art to that. I actually saw this movie. Has anyone here put a one in the chat? Have you all seen the movie The Founder? And I love that movie. I've seen that movie like 10 times. I will probably watch it again. Anyone on the chat seen that movie, The Founder? Well, in the movie, the two McDonald brothers are sharing with a potential investor how they came up with the concept of making it easy for even teenagers to come in and cook and all the processes of it. They're going to explain to him how they came up with this system on making sure that things were smooth in their kitchen for them to operate. One of my favorite phrases that he uses is it's a symphony of efficiency, not a wasted motion. This does not exist right now in so many ERG programs, but it could. Like watching this movie, it gave me hope once upon a time. So I'm like, again, I believe that ERG programs should run like a business. And this is the Speedy system, McDonald's Speedy system is a real thing that they actually did. They mapped out, they took hours to do, but then they were able to have this system of efficiency. This is what needs to be done for ERGs, for ERG programs. We need to have our own version of our Speedy system, essentially, where it's clear on what needs to be done. What are all the movements that ERG leaders need to do, step by step? What are these things? This way, we have program efficiency, which means that we again need to improve the operations of our ERG program. Really, I like this phrase that I wrote down. Consistency is determined by the efficiency of your system, not by the quality of your volunteers, which right now, a lot of times, ERG program managers say, like, we just don't have the right people in place. We need more senior people in our ERGs. That's not the problem. It's just because we don't have the operations down. That is currently the issue. And I've been saying this for like the past couple of years, but I still haven't seen it done, to be honest with you. And I get it because we don't have, who has the time to sit down and bake things out? Well, good news is I've kind of figured it out when it comes to the Speedy system and what is required in order to have that consistency. And believe it or not, there are some nuances across companies. So like company size, what software you use, all the things. But every ERG needs the same things on a consistent cadence for them to be successful. I'll leave you on a cliffhanger on that. I won't tell you what those things are, but just know I figured them out because we have to get to our third thing here. I mentioned this, I think last year in the EPOCH webinar that I did, but I gave this illustration essentially of a orchestra. I just think that it just helps to bring this point home that I'm going to say. In an orchestra, right, there's multiple things. You have to have your musicians, that would be like your ERG leaders. You have like your music, obviously that's the programming that they do. The audience would be the members of the ERGs. The conductor, that would be you, the ERG program manager, whomever is over the ERG program. But there's so much more in order to have a strong orchestra. Really, the thing that a lot of people don't think about, because it's intentionally behind the scenes, would be like the stagehands, the people who get things moving, who, shift the curtains and the lights and adjust the sound, all the things. The reality is, yes, again, you are the conductor as the program manager of your ERG program. But if you don't have an operating system that makes sure that ERG leaders are being held accountable consistently, that the background things are moving, then you are also the stagehands of your ERG program. And that is exhausting. That is the thing that burns out so many ERG program managers is how do we chase the ERG leaders to get them to do the things we want them to do while simultaneously trying to play like this coach role and understanding that they still need a lot of help in the execution. Again, we're getting into that time period where there's back-to-back Heritage Month. Every program manager knows that is exhausting, essentially. February through the end of June. You get like 2 months break, and then you also have more Heritage Months to do. So that's why it's important to have a strong operating system, because at the end of the day, if you don't have one, that means that it's you. Well, that is what is killing ERG efficiency right now. This is kind of a downer of a conversation, but sorry, I like to keep it real, but hopefully you're taking some things away from it. So 5 components of an operating system. This is the speed version. 1, you have to have clear standards. Those are the processes that I'm talking about. So again, baking out every single step to every single thing that an ERG would need to do. Nowadays, there are tools to help you to do this. I'm not going to say that those are all great tools. Like even if you were to use AI to build your handbook, I just did this recently as an experiment. It was a disaster. But we'll say it might just help if you were to take a day just to bake out everything that needs to be done for ERGs in their MVQ. It will save you so much time later. Structure, this is around your governance. So making sure that ERG leaders have consistent roles on their ERG teams and whatnot. Again, if you just saw the Speedy system that was created, it was done via design and a lot of thinking time and whatnot. For a lot of companies, they leave their ERG leaders to design their own governance, their own teams, and say like, hey, you all figure out what's best. There's no way that they're going to long-term achieve operational excellence by them as volunteers coming up with their own structure and whatnot. Anyway, I have a lot to say on structure, but that's something. Systems is another one. When I say systems, I'm not just referring to softwares and whatnot. That's not even what I'm really referencing, but I'm saying what are the tools that you have accessible already? Maybe, for instance, even with like Slack, there's so much that you can do with Slack to increase the operational efficiency of your ERG program. So actually take into account, or maybe I should say, like taking inventory of the systems that you have access to already and then seeing where the gaps are based on, again, that MVQ. Resources. Oh, what was I trying to say here with what's possible? Oh, duh, with your system, some examples of what some of those systems might be. Maybe you might have access to Zapier. A lot of ERG program managers have never touched that, which is concerning because Zapier is a really good automation tool, but it's kind of techy, so I get it. Google Apps Script is terrifying. Don't do it if you don't have to, but it does exist. Power Automate, same exact concept, but these are all automation tools essentially. But Power Automate and Google Apps Script are scary, not worth it in my opinion. Notion, though, I do love Notion as an operating system. And I'm not going too much into operating systems, but again, think of that as the stagehands of your program. Notion, I've seen it done really well, and Slack, I've seen it done really well because I've built them both within both. So I'll say it is possible. So making sure that you maximize the tools that you already have. Resources, really with this, that could be around the budget that you have, the execs you have, but those are bonuses, honestly. If you have those first three S's, that's big. Sustainability, that just means the strategy behind your program, essentially. So all that put together makes for a really strong operating system. Putting this in simple English, that would mean make sure that you have a good handbook. Make sure that you have something that automates reminders to ERG leaders on a consistent cadence that visualizes what they've accomplished and what they haven't accomplished, so it's clear on what still needs to be done, and make sure that you have consistent role structures across all your ERGs. Put in simple language, that's what that basically means. All right, now that speaks to thing number 2. So I said there's 3 things when it comes to having better inputs to have better outcomes. So one was around goal setting. The second one was around increasing consistency via having stronger operations. The last one is when it comes to AI, because now we can have this conversation now that we understand the basics. And I'll go through this piece pretty quickly, but when it comes to automation, AI, all the things, there's 3 levels to it. Automation, then AI, then smart automation, which is like smart AI. Agents would be another word for them. And it goes in this order on purpose. This is super important because right now, the outcome a lot of people have when it comes to AI and their ERGs is we want to incorporate more AI in our program. And that's it. That's an outcome. But what are the inputs that are the back end of this? Thing 1 would be automation. This has to come first because at the end of the day, this speaks to making sure, think about automation as like the hands that do essentially. Now, when it comes to automating something, you have to have a good process first. And that's why we just talked about that. If you haven't clarified the MVQ and all the specific steps, you cannot get a robot to repeat those steps because you haven't even defined it yourself, essentially. So that has to be the thing that you do first. And then you can start with automating some things. Most people do start automating the wrong things. And as a program manager, you might start with automation by saying, well, what can I automate for an ERG leader? Don't do that. If you're going to start automating things, start automating things for yourself. It's easier if it messes up because it only affects you versus affecting all your ERG leaders. And then you're just going to be reminded all the time, hey, this doesn't work, while you're actively trying to learn how to automate things yourself. Start with your own things is what I'll say basically when it comes to automation. Okay, cool. Said that. AI, second piece. I said as its own thing because when you think about ChatGPT and whatnot, there's so much to say. But for me, I think about AI as a memory bank. And again, like I said, automation, I think about it as the hands, essentially. Now, when it comes to improving your memory bank, so leveraging AI, again, that's kind of what I'm trying to say here. That means that you have to have a good set of reference points for its reference, a good set of documentation for its reference, which again, that means that it goes back to processes again. Because if we don't have good processes, then our AI that we try to connect to our processes is going to give us bad information. And even then, if you don't have clear processes, it's going to start making up information. That's called hallucinating within AI. And it does that all the time because we're not specific, essentially. Quick tips on AI, don't rush when it comes to leveraging that within your program, especially if you don't have those first 2 things first. Right now, because information online about ERGs is very surface level, kind of fluff, that is what it's pulling from, and it's not great information. So therefore, it can give some really harmful advice, honestly.
Only as good as the information is provided. And a lot of the
Exactly.
people that's doing that work is not coming from an ERG.
Exactly.
lens.
Exactly. So it's dangerous when that's what you're pulling from. And a lot of people, they do pull from that when it comes to creating even their processes. So that's an issue. But also too, if your documentation, again, if it's not even just being clear, but then the next thing is it has to be AI parsable. There's so much things to do, which means that you now have to format your document so that the AI can read it easier. That is a whole skill set. It is a headache to do, honestly, to AI parse documentation, such a headache. And that means that you have to have your basic handbook that ERG leaders, it's like ERG leader friendly, but then you also have to have your AI readable friendly version. More to do. I know we have a lot to do, but that's why it's good to have this conversation at the beginning of the year. This way we can get it out the way. Really, from an ERG leader perspective, if I think about AI, I think about it accomplishing really these four things: creativity, communication, concepting, and comprehension. Those are the things that I think that AI can support with when it comes to ERG leaders in particular. But that's less on program managers. I'm just saying if you had to tell your ERG leaders how to leverage it to help come up with ideas for programming, to help come up with things that they can post or rewriting posts or whatnot, coming up with concepts for programming or better understanding how to do something. It is still pretty fun when it comes to AI. There are still some cool things that you can do. I was going to do this thing in this presentation where I go through even just the most recent updates in AI in the last week. There's so many. It's moving so fast and it can do a lot when it comes to ERGs. However, I am here to assure you it can get overwhelming if you try to attack it all at once. If you try to adopt every new thing, it will get overwhelming. I'm saying this as someone who, at least according to ChatGPT, I am one of the biggest AI users of it. I asked it this morning and it is what it is. We're not perfect. And that's just my thing. But I say this to say, even then, I've tried out so many AI tools and whatnot. Don't try to attack them all. If you're going to pick one, just pick actually just one that you can do really well at. Which brings us to this last piece, smart automation. That's level 3. This is kind of like the future of AI, where now you have your hands that are connected to that memory bank, and now it can do things on its own. A lot of things cannot do this yet when it comes to ERGs, because again, we don't have good information to feed it. However, I will just say there is one tool, and it's the only reason why I'm here today, because there's only one smart automation tool when it comes to ERGs. And I do not work for EPOCH, but I'm literally just saying, honestly, I have looked at all of the ERG softwares out here and I'm rarely impressed. For years, I was like, not worth it. This is the only tool that literally does stuff for your ERGs, where it can literally create event descriptions for them, put it on the calendar, automatically create the post-event survey, send it out to them. Like it actually does things, not just regurgitate information, not just automate bad processes that we don't already have, but it actually does things for them. So it is a plug to EPOCH. Again, but I'm telling you all honestly, if you had to adopt one thing when it comes to ERGs that is in the AI automation space, if that is one of your goals to incorporate AI automation, it's the only one as well that does this right now. So it is what it is. And that's my honest opinion. Like I said, for many years, I was not a fan of ERG softwares, but this is the only one, which is EPOCH, which they're hosting the webinar today if you want more information on them in general. If in the meantime, if you're just like, well, I just need a starting point, like how do I set our ERGs up for success, even just to prepare? Because at the end of the day, too, EPOCH, they do connect to your documentation, which is great because that means that they're able to customize what responses it gives and like how it does stuff. How you can even best prepare for that is you can start with getting your processes automation worthy. All right. That's what I have for you. And that's kind of like my spiel today.
Thank you, everyone, again for joining. Thank you, Maceo, for taking the time. I mean, for walking us through a lot of those pieces. Before we even kind of dive into kind of the end of this programming, I think it is important, kind of the pieces you hit about automation, making sure you have the process right first, figuring out what tools. And I think all of us, especially when we're trying to use AI, whether it is EPOCH, whether it's another tool, whether it's ChatGPT, being able to focus and give yourself that grace when you're trying to figure out what you should be using is an important reminder for all of us, because we are when we're working in these spaces, sometimes we can get forgotten when it comes to some of the business purposes of using AI, but it is so important, especially because of the resources that are available to us, that we do figure out how we can continue to get smarter. So thank you for laying that out for us. Of course, I appreciate that May kind of gave the plug, and Shade as well. Thank you from Reddit for talking about this. I will quickly talk about Agent Epoch, but also just kind of our thoughts about AI adoption. Don't worry, this will be 3 slides. We will get through this quickly. But this very much aligns with what Maceo was talking about. We believe that there are a couple of different spaces where you can be with your level of AI adoption. Maybe you can look through this and kind of see where you believe you are. We think there's a place where we can help today, and then we also see a future state in terms of kind of creating these agents today that help operationalize a lot of the things that you have to do as you're running your employee engagement and workplace programs. And Maceo, honestly, is a better salesperson on this than I am. But these are kind of the main pieces. Talking about that historical amount of information that you can get. When we talked about online, there isn't as much about ERGs. So oftentimes you do want to be able to pull from your current silo of information and the events that you've done in the past. So we make it very simple to do that event generation. So pulling from the past context of what has worked and from the surveys that you've put on, from the events and from different policies that you have in place to quickly spin up events. But then on the back end, we also do really like to think about that ROI piece. Return on investment, definitely a buzzword. But when we think about our teams, when it's those ERG teams, when it's those people teams, those workplace teams, being able to actually go into the data and report back to whoever you're reporting to, whether that is the company, whether that is kind of your individual manager, or even for the chief people officer to be able to report to the board. We all understand that employee engagement is important, but here at EPOCH, we're hoping to kind of make it easier to show what that ROI is. So that's Agent EPOCH in a nutshell. Happy to. Oh, we have a question.
I was just answering.
Okay.
Someone.
Okay. Sounds good. But yeah, so happy to kind of connect and share more about Agent EPOCH here. But quickly, wanted to share a few things. As we said at the top, we do love to try to get people together virtually and in person when we can. One of these dates in Phoenix, we may be shifting that a little bit, but we're going to be in Phoenix, Denver, LA, and San Diego at the start of this first quarter of the year. And then we also have EPOCH Connect. Yes, slides will be made available. We'll also share the join Slack link to the ERG Champs channel. There will be a blog. This video itself will be made available on YouTube. So we will follow up with all of that for you all, just to make sure that you can go back and look at the tidbits that Maceo shared. But just back to some of these pieces, we'll be on the road. We're excited to host our largest conference, EPOCH Connect. It's a 2-day conference where we bring together a lot of really great people to be able to just explore and talk about the things that are important to them around employee experience. Maceo has presented many times at many of our conferences. We are very thankful for that, but we like to bring a lot of different leaders who have expertise in a lot of different areas, but also continue to build that community and continue to give us reasons to have touch points and continue to learn from each other. This is a QR code. We'll also be sending this around as well if you do want to scan it. For the people here, we also have these postcards for you, but feel free to scan to grab your tickets for Connect this year. And just wanted to show kind of a retrospective of how it went last year. A lot of great fun. We were here kind of near Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco. We had puppies, good people, and a lot of good conversation. So once again, if you missed it, QR code here. But that wraps it up for us today. Thank you, all of you, for joining. These webinars and kind of the in-person lunch and learns wouldn't happen without you all taking the time and wanting to be kind of a part of the learning and the community. So reach out as you need pieces. I will have a bunch of follow-up later to make sure you all have all this information. But Maceo, thank you again. I'm going to go on mute if there's anything else you want to share, but thank you everyone for joining on the webinar and in person.
Nothing really for me. Check out ergs.io. It's free. And that's kind of like my gift to the space.
So here at EPOCH, we are an employee experience software. But the reason that we do these webinars and lunch and learns is about building community. And we like to have this series where we are bringing in leaders like Maceo who can kind of speak to something that they're very experienced in, talk about strategies, and allow us all to learn through that community, through that shared knowledge. So we're glad that you all could join us today. We, as I said, EPOCH, we work with a number of companies that we're happy to work with on things like all hands, happy hours, ERG trainings, and other ERG plannings. And we love to be able to build this community, one, because we would love for you all to be customers for those of you who aren't customers, but also we understand that this employee experience, this workplace, this employee resource group, no matter what the actual title is internally, it matters for how companies operate and how companies continue to show that their employees are important. So with that, I will kick it off to Maceo.
All right, good stuff. Excited to be here. Maceo here. I go by the ERG Homegirl for those who don't know. She, her pronouns, all things ERGs. I actually see some folks in the chat, or at least in the participant list that I'm familiar with. And I get to meet two new people in person today, which is pretty cool. I'm not going to do too much with talking about myself because there's a lot to discuss. And if you know me well, you know that I'm a bit of a rambler. So I want to make sure that we're able to get to all the things that I have to discuss when it comes to today's topic around automation and whatnot. But if I was to give you a couple of high levels, I'll say I was an ERG leader once upon a time, eventually became a program manager. Now it's been 2.5 years that I've been doing work full time, helping companies all over the world with their ERG programs. There's much work to be done in the space, but I try to give out as many resources as possible, a lot of them even free, including things like ERGs.io, which we just rolled out, an ERG enablement software platform type of thing. More on that, but I mean, just know it's pretty cool database of ERG resources and whatnot. Right now, there's over 5,000 examples of ERG programming across companies, across industries on there. We also have a vendor database on there. This way you're able to go and you don't have to like search for people to bring into your company. Like it's just the people that are great for ERGs. Lots of resources I like to give out and just do. So anyway, you'll learn more about some of those maybe later in the session. But just know I'm a big fan of, like I said, making your lives easier within the ERG space.